Captain Sarah Chen pressed her back against the twisted metal remains of what used to be downtown Chicago, her breathing ragged and harsh in the toxic air. Around her, the skeletal frames of skyscrapers reached toward the heavens like the fingers of dead giants. The Kethmori had been efficient in their destruction. For 3 years, humanity had fought. For 3 years, they had lost. Sarah's rifle felt impossibly heavy in her hands as she watched the last of her squad fall back through the rubble-strewn streets. Martinez was gone. Rodriguez, too. Of the 50 soldiers who had started this final push at dawn, only 7 remained. "Contact left," shouted Private Williams, his voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. Sarah spun, her weapon raised, just as the first Kethmori warrior stepped into view. Even after 3 years of war, the sight of them still stole her breath. 8 feet tall, with midnight black carapaces that seemed to absorb light itself, they moved with a predatory grace that defied their massive size. 4 arms ending in razor-sharp talons, eyes like burning coals, and mandibles that could crush. A human skull like an eggshell. This one was different, though. Where the others wore simple battle harnesses, this warrior's armor was elaborate, etched with symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the flickering light of the burning city. A commander, Sarah realized. One of their war leaders. The creature's burning gaze swept across the human survivors with what looked almost like boredom. When those eyes locked onto Sarah's, something cold slithered down her spine. "You fought well, human," the alien said, its voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. Perfect English, spoken with the casual indifference of someone commenting on the weather. "Your species showed more resilience than we anticipated." Sarah kept her rifle trained on the creature's center mass, knowing it would do little good. The Kethmori's natural armor could turn aside most human weapons, but she held her ground anyway. "Not well enough, apparently," she replied, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. The alien tilted its massive head, a gesture that was almost curious. "Indeed, your cities burn, your armies are scattered, your governments have fallen, and yet here you stand, weapon raised, defiant to the end." The creature took a step closer. "Why?" Sarah felt Williams tense beside her, his finger hovering over his trigger. She held up one hand, keeping him still. Something about this moment felt important. Final. "Because someone has to," she said simply. For a long moment, the only sounds were the distant rumble of collapsing buildings and the whisper of toxic wind through the ruins. The Kethmori commander stood perfectly still, studying her with those burning eyes. Then, something impossible happened. The creature laughed, not the harsh chittering sound Sarah had heard from other Kethmori, but something that was almost human, rich and deep, and utterly unexpected. "Remarkable," the alien said. 3 years of war, and I finally meet one of you who speaks truth, without fear." The creature's 4 arms spread wide in what might have been a gesture of respect. "I am Warsinger Vexitar of the 3rd Talon. What are you called? Small warrior?" Sarah blinked, caught off guard by the formal introduction. "Captain, Sarah Chen, United Earth Defense Force, Captain Sarah Chen," Vexitar repeated as if testing the sound of her name. "I have a proposition for you. I'm not in the habit of making deals with the enemy." "Enemy?" The alien's mandibles clicked in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as amusement. "Look around you, Captain. The war is over. Your species has 37 hours before the final orbital bombardment begins. After that, your world will be nothing but ash and memory." Sarah's blood turned to ice. 37 hours. The rumors had been true then. The Kethmori were planning to sterilize the planet entirely. "However," Vexitar continued, "I find myself curious about your kind. You have something the rest of the galaxy lacks. Something we thought we had destroyed long ago in ourselves. And what's that?" "Hope." The word sounded strange in the alien's voice, as if it were speaking a foreign language. "You stand here facing certain death with nothing but defiance and impossible hope. It intrigues me." Sarah felt Williams shift beside her, confusion radiating. from the young soldier. She kept her eyes on Vextar. What's your point? My point, Captain Sarah Chen, is that I would like to understand this quality you possess, and I believe there is only one way to do so. The alien took another step forward, close enough now that Sarah could see her reflection in its obsidian carapace. I propose a duel. Single combat. You and I, here in the ruins of your greatest city. Sarah's finger tightened on her trigger. To the death? To the death, Vextar confirmed. But if by some miracle you should prevail, I will do something no Kethmori commander has ever done. I will halt the bombardment. I will spare your world. The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah stared up at the massive alien warrior, her mind racing. It was impossible. She was 5.5 feet tall and barely 130 pounds. Vextar was a living weapon, evolved for war across a dozen star systems. Even if her rifle could penetrate its armor, she would never be fast enough to get a killing shot. But 37 hours. 37 hours until the end of everything. And if I lose? She asked. When you lose, Vextar corrected gently, you will have died as a warrior should, with honor. Your species will follow you into extinction, knowing that their champion fought with courage to the very end. Sarah looked back at Williams and the other survivors. They were watching her with expressions of barely contained terror and desperate hope. 6 billion people were going to die in 37 hours. The war was over. Earth was lost. But maybe, just maybe, one impossible chance remained. She lowered her rifle and began stripping off her tactical gear. What are the terms? Vextar's eyes blazed brighter. Hand to hand, no weapons, no armor. First to draw blood wins. Sarah almost laughed. First to draw blood, against a creature whose natural weapons could cut through steel. But she nodded anyway. Give me 5 minutes to say goodbye to my people. Take all the time you need, Captain Sarah Chen. We have waited 3 years for this moment. We can wait a little longer. As Sarah turned to face her soldiers, she caught something in Vextar's voice that made her pause, something that sounded almost like anticipation. Not the bloodlust of a predator about to make a kill, but something else entirely. For the first time since the war began, Sarah Chen felt something that might have been hope. Chapter 2. The impossible duel. Sarah stripped down to her basic combat fatigues, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. Around her, the remnants of her squad watched in stunned silence as she prepared to face a creature that could tear her apart with its bare hands. Captain, Williams whispered, stepping close enough that only she could hear. This is suicide. We could try to run, find another way. There is no other way, Private. Sarah checked the knife at her belt one final time, then removed it as well, setting it aside with the rest of her gear. 37 hours, remember? Even if we could somehow escape this city, where would we go? The whole planet is marked for termination. William's young face crumpled. But you can't actually win this, it's impossible. Sarah turned to face him, placing a steady hand on his shoulder. 3 years ago, everyone said it was impossible that humanity would survive the first week of the invasion. 2 years ago, they said it was impossible that we'd last through the winter. Last year, they said it was impossible that any of our major cities would still be standing. She gestured toward the ruins around them. Chicago was gone, yes, but they had made the aliens fight for every inch of it. Sometimes, Private, impossible just means no one's been stubborn enough to try yet. Across the cleared space they had chosen for the duel, Vextar was also preparing. The alien had removed its elaborate armor, revealing a body that was even more intimidating without the ceremonial trappings. Muscle and sinew flowed beneath that midnight carapace like living steel, and those forearms moved with a coordination that spoke of centuries of combat experience. But Sarah noticed something else as she watched the Kethmori commander. The way Vextar moved, the careful attention it paid to each piece of armor as it was set aside. There was reverence there. Ritual. This wasn't just a quick execution for the aliens' amusement. This meant something. Captain Chen, Vextar called out, straightening to its full 8-foot height. Are you prepared? Sarah took a deep breath of the toxic air and stepped into the center of the cleared space. The ground beneath her feet was a mixture of concrete, dust and ash, the remains of a civilization that had once touched the stars. I'm ready. The alien warrior studied her for a long moment, those burning eyes taking in every detail of her stance, her breathing, the way she held herself. Sarah had the strange feeling she was being evaluated, weighed against some internal standard she couldn't begin to understand. Before we begin, Vextar said, I would know something about you, small warrior. What drives you to this hopeless act? What do you believe you can accomplish here? Sarah considered the question. Around them, both human and alien forces had gathered to witness this impossible confrontation. Her own soldiers huddled together in the shadow of a collapsed overpass, while Kethmori warriors perched on the skeletal remains of skyscrapers like enormous metal ravens. I've been fighting your people for 3 years, she said finally. I've watched them burn cities, slaughter civilians, reduce entire continents to wasteland. They fight with the cold efficiency of machines, killing without anger, without passion, without mercy. Vextar's mandibles clicked softly. You speak truth. We are a weapon race, forged in the crucible of galactic war. Emotion is weakness. Mercy is inefficiency. But you're different, Sarah continued, circling slowly to her left, keeping her distance. You ask questions, you laugh, you offer duels instead of simply executing prisoners. Why? For the first time since their encounter began, Vextar hesitated. The alien's burning gaze flickered away from Sarah's face, just for an instant, but long enough for her to notice. Because, Vextar said slowly, 3 years of war with your species has awakened something in me that I thought was long dead. Something my people sacrificed millennia ago in our quest for military perfection. And what's that? Curiosity. The word came out like a confession. Wonder. The ability to see beauty in defiance, honor in hopeless struggle. You humans fight not because you have any realistic chance of victory, but because the alternative is surrender. And surrender to you is worse than death. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the toxic wind. You're talking about things your people gave up. Why would a warrior race sacrifice curiosity and wonder? Vextar's forearms spread wide, a gesture of openness that looked somehow vulnerable despite the alien's massive size. Because they make you weak, Captain Chen. They make you hesitate in the moment when hesitation means death. They make you question orders, seek alternatives, to violence search for meaning beyond mere survival. They make you human, Sarah said softly. Yes. The word was barely above a whisper. And that is why this duel is necessary. Not to prove human courage, which needs no proof, but to answer a question that has haunted me since the first day I set foot on your world. Sarah stopped circling, sensing that they had reached the heart of something important. What question? Vextar's eyes blazed brighter, and when the alien spoke, its voice carried a weight that seemed to shake the very air around them. Whether it is possible for one of my kind to become something more than a weapon. Whether the things we sacrificed can be reclaimed. Whether a Kethmori warrior can learn to be human. The silence that followed was profound. Sarah stared up at the alien commander, understanding beginning to dawn in her mind. This wasn't about proving human courage or Kethmori superiority. This was about something far more personal, far more desperate. This was about redemption. Win or lose, Vextar continued. This duel will answer that question. If I defeat you easily, with the cold efficiency my people expect, then I am what I have always been. A weapon, nothing more. And if you don't, then perhaps there is hope for more than just your species, Captain Sarah Chen. Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the knot of despair that had lived there for 3 years. She looked up at this impossible alien warrior, this living weapon who had somehow found a spark of humanity in the ashes of her world. And she smiled. Well then, she said, dropping into a combat stance she hadn't used since her academy days. I guess we better find out. Vexitar mirrored her movement, forearms weaving through the air in patterns that spoke of martial disciplines older than human civilization. But there was something different in the alien's posture now, something that hadn't been there moments before. Uncertainty. For the first time in its long life, war-singer Vexitar of the Third Talon was fighting for something more important than victory. It was fighting for its soul. The duel began. Chapter 3. What makes us human? Sarah had expected the alien to come at her like a hurricane of claws and muscle. Instead, Vexitar moved with careful, almost hesitant precision, each step measured and deliberate. The first exchange was almost gentle. Vexitar's uppermost right arm swept toward Sarah's head in what should have been a killing blow, but the alien pulled the strike at the last moment. Talons passing inches from her face, Sarah ducked anyway, pivoting left and driving her elbow toward what she hoped was a vulnerable spot beneath the alien's arm. Her strike connected with armor-hard carapace and sent jarring pain up to her shoulder. It was like punching a steel wall. They separated, circling each other warily. Sarah's arm throbbed, but she kept her expression neutral. Vexitar hadn't even seemed to notice the impact. Interesting, the alien rumbled. You target weak points instinctively. Combat training or natural intuition? Sarah blinked, surprised by the casual tone. She had expected taunts, threats, intimidation tactics. Instead, Vexitar sounded genuinely curious. Both, she replied, watching for an opening that probably didn't exist. Military Academy teaches you to analyze your opponent's anatomy, find the vulnerable spots, but you learn pretty quickly that textbook knowledge only gets you so far. Truth. Vexitar's mandibles clicked approvingly. My people spend decades studying the physiology of every species we encounter, and yet your kind continues to surprise us with innovations we never anticipated. They were still circling, but now Sarah realized this was as much conversation as combat. Vexitar was studying her, yes, but not just as an opponent. The alien was trying to understand something. Like, what? Sarah asked, genuinely curious despite the surreal nature of having a polite discussion while preparing to fight to the death. Like using our own strengths against us. Vexitar's second pair of arms moved in demonstration, showing the complex coordination required to manage 4 limbs in combat. We assumed our additional appendages would provide insurmountable advantage. Instead, your warriors learn to create situations where our extra arms become entanglements, where our superior reach becomes overextension. Sarah felt a brief moment of pride. Humanity's military tacticians had indeed developed strategies, specifically designed to exploit Kethmori advantages, turning them into weaknesses. But the pride faded quickly as she remembered how few of those tacticians were still alive. Innovation born of desperation, she said. When you're outgunned, outmanned, and outclassed, you learn to think creatively or you die. Yet another quality we sacrificed long ago. Vexitar's tone carried something that might have been regret. Desperation. The mother of innovation, as one of your philosophers called it. The alien moved then, but not with the killing speed Sarah had expected. Instead, Vexitar flowed forward like water, all 4 arms weaving complex patterns that were almost hypnotic to watch. Sarah found herself backing away, not from fear, but from a strange sense of being studied, dissected, understood on some fundamental level. Tell me, Captain Chen, Vexitar said as they continued their deadly dance. What do you fight for? Not your species. They are already lost. Not your world. It will be ash within the day. What drives you to this moment? Sarah considered the question as she ducked under a sweep of talons that could have opened her throat. The movement brought her inside Vexitar's reach, and she drove her fist upward toward what anatomy text suggested might be a nerve cluster. Again, her blow connected with impenetrable carapace. Again, Vexitar seemed barely to notice. I fight for the idea, Sarah said, spinning away before those 4 arms could entangle her. The idea that conscious beings shouldn't have to live in fear, that intelligence and curiosity and wonder are worth preserving, even if the beings who carry them are flawed. Even when those beings wage war against each other, even when they destroy their own environment, oppress their own kind, commit acts of unconscionable cruelty? Sarah felt a flash of anger. You think your people are any better? You've spent the last 3 years turning entire worlds into graveyards. At least humans feel guilty about our mistakes. Guilt. Vextar spoke the word like it was an alien concept, which Sarah realized it probably was. Another thing we discarded, along with mercy, compassion, love. The alien's voice trailed off, and for a moment, the dance of combat slowed. Vextar stood perfectly still, forearms hanging loose at its sides, burning eyes distant. Love, the alien repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar flavor. Your kind speaks of it constantly. In your music, your literature, your final messages, before battle. What is it, this thing that makes you fight so desperately for those you will never see again? Sarah felt tears prick her eyes thinking of everyone she had lost over the past 3 years. Friends, family, lovers, comrades. The weight of their memory was almost crushing. Love is, she began, then stopped. How do you explain color to someone who was born blind? How do you describe music to someone who was born deaf? How do you explain love to a creature whose species had deliberately excised it from their souls? Love is the reason you feel empty, she said finally. It's the missing piece that makes you question what you are. It's the thing that makes life worth living, even when living becomes impossible. Vextar's eyes blazed brighter. Show me. What? Show me love, Captain Sarah Chen. In this moment, in this place, with death seconds away for one of us. Show me what it means. Sarah stared up at the alien warrior, understanding beginning to bloom in her chest. This wasn't about proving human worth or Kethmori superiority. This was about one lost soul trying to find its way back to something that had been stolen from it millennia ago. This was about healing. Sarah thought of Williams and the other survivors watching from the shadows. She thought of the billions of people who would die when the orbital bombardment began. She thought of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there, waiting to be discovered. And she thought of this impossible alien warrior, standing alone in the ruins of civilization, trying to remember what it meant to be more than a weapon. Love, Sarah said, dropping her combat stance and opening her arms wide, is choosing to be vulnerable. It's caring more about someone else's survival than your own. It's hope in the face of hopelessness, kindness in the face of cruelty, connection in the face of isolation. She took a step closer to Vextar, close enough to touch. It's looking at someone completely different from yourself and choosing to see them as worthy of protection, even when they're your enemy, even when they could kill you, even when showing that care might be the last thing you ever do. Vexitar stood frozen, all 4 arms trembling slightly. Those burning eyes were locked on Sarah's face with an intensity that should have been terrifying. You would show love to one who has come to destroy your world? I would show love to one who has forgotten how to love themselves, Sarah replied softly. The silence stretched between them, profound and sacred. Around the edges of the clearing, both human and alien witnesses watched in stunned confusion as their champions stood motionless, no longer opponents, but something else entirely. Something unprecedented, something that might just change everything. Then, Vextar did something that would be remembered for as long as conscious beings existed in the galaxy. The mighty Kethmori warrior, terror of a dozen star systems, architect of humanity's destruction, fell to its knees. Spare me, human, Vextar whispered, voice breaking with emotions that had no names in the Kethmori language. I'll be whatever you want. Just, please, teach me how to feel. Chapter 4. The Weight of Choice. Sarah stared down at the kneeling alien warrior, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. Around the clearing, absolute silence reigned. Even the distant sounds of the burning city seemed to have faded away, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Vextar, she said softly, stand up. The alien's massive head lifted, those burning eyes now dim with something that looked impossibly like shame. I have broken the sacred codes of my people, I have shown weakness before the enemy. You've shown courage, Sarah interrupted. The kind of courage it takes to admit you've lost something important and want to find it again. Slowly, uncertainly, Vextar rose to its full height. But the alien's posture had changed. Where before there had been predatory confidence, now there was something almost fragile, vulnerable. From the shadows came the sound of movement. Sarah turned to see Williams and the other survivors emerging from their hiding places, weapons lowered but ready. Their faces showed a mixture of confusion, hope, and barely contained terror. "Captain," Williams called out, his voice tight with stress. "What's happening here?" Sarah looked back at Vextar, then at her soldiers, then at the alien witnesses, perched on the ruins around them. The weight of this moment was staggering. Whatever happened next would ripple out across the galaxy, changing the course of history itself. "Something unprecedented," she said finally. "Something that might just save us all." She turned to face Vextar fully. "You said if I won our duel, you would halt the bombardment. But there was no winner here, was there? There was just understanding." Vextar's mandibles clicked softly. "The duel revealed what I came to learn. You showed me love, Captain Chen. You showed me what my people lost when we chose to become weapons instead of beings. And now I must make a choice that no Kethmori commander has ever faced." Vexitar's forearms spread wide, encompassing the ruined city around them. "I can follow my orders and complete the destruction of your world, or I can choose a different path." Sarah felt her heart hammering against her ribs. What kind of different path? The path of redemption. Vextar's voice carried a weight of decision that seemed to echo off the broken buildings. "Not just for myself, but for my entire species." The alien commander turned toward the ruins where its own warriors waited, and when it spoke, its voice carried across the entire clearing with thunderous authority. "Warriors of the Third Talon, hear your warsinger speak." The response was immediate. Kethmori soldiers dropped from their perches, flowing across the rubble-strewn ground like liquid shadow until they formed a perfect circle around the clearing. Sarah counted at least 50 of them, each one a killing machine that could tear apart her entire squad without effort. "For 3 years we have waged war against this species," Vextar continued. "We have done so because we were told they were inferior, unworthy of the worlds they inhabited. We were told that their destruction was necessary for galactic order." Sarah could see confusion rippling through the alien ranks. This was clearly not what they had expected to hear from their commander. "But I have learned something here today," Vextar said, gesturing toward Sarah. "Something that changes everything. These humans possess qualities that we sacrificed long ago in our pursuit of military perfection. Qualities that make existence meaningful beyond mere survival." The alien warrior stepped forward, its own armor marking it as a sub-commander. When it spoke, its voice carried the hard edge of military discipline. "Warsinger, you speak of things that weaken the will and dull the blade. Our purpose is clear. Our orders are absolute. The bombardment begins in 36 hours. "Our orders," Vextar replied calmly, "come from leaders who have never set foot on a world like this, who have never spoken with beings like these, who have never learned what we have learned." The sub-commander's burning eyes flicked toward Sarah and her soldiers. "And what is that, Warsinger?" "That we are not the apex of evolution, as we have always believed. We are an evolutionary dead end. A species that chose survival over growth, efficiency over meaning, power over wisdom." Vextar's voice grew stronger with each word. "These humans, fragile as they are, have achieved something we thought impossible. They have learned to be strong without sacrificing compassion, to be intelligent without abandoning wonder, to be warriors without losing their souls." Sarah felt tears rolling down her cheeks. She had spent 3 years watching her species die, believing that humanity's greatest achievements would be forgotten, that all their art and music and literature and love would vanish without trace. To hear these words from the mouth of their greatest enemy. "What are you proposing, Warsinger?" the sub-commander asked, though its tone suggested it already knew the answer. "I am proposing that we do something unprecedented in Kethmori history," Vextar said. I am proposing that we learn." The alien commander turned back to Sarah, and she saw something in those burning eyes that took her breath away. Not the cold efficiency of a weapon, but the warm glow of genuine hope. "Captain Chen, I cannot undo the damage my people have inflicted on your world. I cannot bring back your dead or rebuild your cities, but I can offer you something else." "What?" "Partnership." The word hung in the air like a prayer. "Your people have something mine desperately need. We have knowledge and technology that could help rebuild what we have destroyed. Together, we might become something greater than either species could achieve alone." Sarah looked around the clearing, taking in the impossible scene. Human soldiers standing beside alien warriors, enemies who moments ago had been prepared to fight to the death, now united by something far more powerful than hatred. "The bombardment will not happen," Vexitar said firmly. "I will personally ensure that no more worlds burn under Kethmori fire. But this is bigger than just your planet, Captain. This is about the future of two species, and possibly the entire galaxy." Sarah felt the weight of choice settling on her shoulders. She was just one human soldier, exhausted and traumatized by 3 years of war. How could she possibly make a decision that would affect billions of lives? But then she looked at Williams and her other soldiers, saw the desperate hope in their eyes. She thought of all the people who had died fighting for the simple right to exist, to love, to dream of something better. She thought of what humanity could become, if given the chance, to heal and grow and reach for the stars again. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked. "Alliance," Vextar said. "Not conquest, not subjugation, but true partnership. Your people would maintain sovereignty over your own worlds. My people would serve as protectors and teachers, helping you rebuild and expand across the galaxy. In return, you would help us remember what we once were, help us become what we could be." Sarah looked up at the alien warrior who had somehow found its way back from the brink of spiritual extinction. "And if your superiors disagree with this plan?" Vextar's mandibles clicked in what Sarah now recognized as determined amusement. "Then they will face something they have never encountered before. A Kethmori rebellion led by warriors who have remembered how to feel." Around the clearing, Sarah could see other alien soldiers listening intently to their commander's words. Some looked confused, others concerned, but more than a few seemed intrigued, as if Vextar's words had awakened something in them as well. "This is insane," Sarah said softly. "Yes," Vextar agreed. "Completely, utterly, impossibly insane. And that, Captain Chen, is exactly why it might work." Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of history balanced on this single moment. When she opened them again, she saw not an enemy, but a lost soul who had somehow found its way home. She extended her hand toward the towering alien warrior. "Partners?" she asked. Vextar looked down at her outstretched hand with something approaching wonder. Slowly, carefully, the alien reached out with one massive talon and gently touched Sarah's palm. "Partners," Vextar agreed, and in that moment, the galaxy changed forever. Epilogue. New beginnings. 6 months later. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the orbital station that had once been a Kethmori battleship, watching the sunrise paint Earth's healing atmosphere in shades of gold and rose. Below her, the planet that had been scheduled for extinction was showing the first green signs of recovery. "The atmospheric processors are working better than we projected," came a familiar rumbling voice from behind her. Sarah turned to see Vextar, approaching, the alien's armor now bearing new symbols alongside the traditional war marks, symbols of peace, cooperation, and something that roughly translated as growth through understanding. "Your people's bioremediation technology is remarkable," Sarah said, gesturing toward the planet below. "We never dreamed we could reverse the environmental damage so quickly. And your people's resilience continues to astonish us," Vextar replied, joining her at the viewing port. "The reconstruction efforts in what was once Chicago are ahead of schedule. Your engineers have adapted our construction techniques in ways we never considered." Sarah smiled. The past 6 months had been challenging in ways that warfare had never been. Learning to trust former enemies, bridging cultural gaps that spanned millions of years of evolution, dealing with resistance from both human and Kethmori, extremists who preferred the simplicity of hatred to the complexity of cooperation. But it was working. Slowly, carefully, impossibly, it was working. "Any word from the Kethmori High Command?" Sarah asked. Vextar's mandibles clicked in what she had learned was the equivalent of a rueful smile. "They are displeased. 3 star systems have declared independence from central authority following our example. Several war singers have requested transfers to human space, claiming they wish to study our methods. And the resistance movements? Growing stronger. It seems that once you remind a warrior what they are fighting for beyond mere survival, they become remarkably difficult to control." Vextar paused, looking down at Earth's recovering surface. "My people spent so long believing that emotion was weakness. We forgot that it can also be strength." Sarah nodded, thinking of the report she had been reading. Across human space, former enemies were working side by side to rebuild not just cities and ecosystems, but something far more precious: hope for the future. "There's something I've been meaning to ask you," she said. "That day in Chicago when you knelt and asked me to teach you how to feel, did you know how it would end? Did you plan any of this?" Vextar was quiet for a long moment. Forearms, moving in the complex patterns that Sarah had learned, indicated deep thought. "I knew that something fundamental needed to change," the alien said finally. "Not just for my people, but for the galaxy as a whole. We had become so efficient at destruction that we had forgotten the purpose of creation. Your species reminded us of that purpose. But you couldn't have known I would make the choice I did. I could have tried to kill you, or demanded your surrender, or—" "You could have," Vextar agreed. "But you didn't. You chose compassion over vengeance, understanding over conquest, love over hatred. That choice, Captain Chen, may have saved more than just 2 species. It may have saved the idea that different peoples can coexist and grow together." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, as they often did when she considered the magnitude of what they had accomplished. "Do you think it will last? This alliance we've built?" "I think," Vextar said slowly, "that we have given the galaxy something it has never had before. A model for how different species can not just coexist, but truly thrive together. Other worlds are watching us, Captain. Other species are beginning to ask questions about their own assumptions and limitations." Through the viewport, Sarah could see the lights of New Geneva beginning to twinkle as the planet rotated into evening. The city that had been built on the ruins of Chicago was unlike anything humanity had ever created. A perfect fusion of human artistry and Kethmori engineering, reaching toward the stars with grace and power in equal measure. "William sent me a message yesterday," Sarah said. "He's been accepted into the joint xenobiology program at the new University of Earth Kethmor. He wants to study interspecies cooperation." Vextar's eyes brightened with what Sarah had learned to recognize as pleasure. "The young warrior who stood beside you that day? He showed great courage. He's not the only one. Half my surviving squad has entered joint training programs. They say they want to be part of building something instead of just fighting to survive." Sarah paused, watching a transport ship rise from Earth's surface, carrying both human and Kethmori passengers toward the orbital stations. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had made a different choice that day." "Then you would not be Captain Sarah Chen," Vextar said simply. "You would be someone else entirely. The choice you made came from who you are at your core. It could not have been otherwise." A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Sarah activated her personal comm unit, and the holographic image of Admiral Morrison appeared before them. The old man looked tired, but hopeful, a combination that had become common among human leadership since the alliance began. "Captain Chen, Warsinger Vextar," Morrison said with a formal nod. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Admiral," Sarah replied. "What's the situation?" "We've received a priority communication from the Andorian Coalition. They've been observing our unprecedented arrangement, and they're requesting a formal diplomatic meeting." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The Andorians were one of the most powerful species in the local galactic arm. known for their strict neutrality and reluctance to engage with what they considered primitive civilizations. "They want to meet with us?" she asked. "With both of you specifically," Morrison clarified. "It seems word of your partnership has spread farther than we thought. The Andorians are curious about how a warrior race and an emotional species have managed to achieve what they're calling impossible synthesis." Vextar stepped forward, all four arms moving in patterns of intense interest. "Admiral Morrison, what exactly are the Andorians proposing?" "A three-way alliance," Morrison said, his voice carrying barely contained excitement. "They're offering to share advanced stellar engineering technology in exchange for what they call consultation on interspecies integration protocols. Apparently, they've been having their own problems with cultural stagnation." Sarah and Vextar exchanged glances. The implications were staggering. The Andorians controlled trade routes across half the galaxy. An alliance with them would open up possibilities that neither human nor Keth Mori had ever dreamed of. "There's more," Morrison continued. "The Centauri Republic has also sent inquiries. So have the Vegan Trade Confederation and the Rigel Science Collective. It seems everyone wants to understand how we've managed to turn enemies into partners." "The galaxy is changing," Vextar murmured, wonder clear in the alien's voice. "What we began on Earth is spreading." Sarah felt a familiar tightness in her chest, the weight of responsibility that had become her constant companion. "Admiral, these are decisions that affect entire civilizations. I'm just a soldier who got lucky." Morrison's weathered face creased into a smile. "Captain, with respect, you're the soldier who stood in the ruins of Chicago and chose love over hatred when the entire future of two species hung in the balance. If anyone is qualified to help navigate these waters, it's you. Both of you," he added, nodding toward Vexistar. "The galaxy has been waiting for centuries for someone to prove that different species can truly cooperate instead of just coexist. You've done that. Now the question is, are you ready to help others do the same?" Sarah looked out at the stars visible through the viewport, thinking of all the worlds out there, all the species struggling with their own limitations and fears. She thought of the choice she had made 6 months ago, and how that single moment of compassion had rippled outward to touch entire civilizations. "What do you think?" she asked Vextar. The alien warrior was quiet for a long moment, burning eyes fixed on the infinite expanse of space beyond the station. When Vextar spoke, the words carried the weight of destiny. "I think, Captain Chen, that we have been given a gift. The opportunity to help the galaxy discover what we learned in the ruins of your greatest city. That difference is not something to be feared or conquered, but something to be celebrated and shared." Vextar turned to face both Sarah and the Admiral's hologram. "I believe it is time for the next phase of our impossible journey." Sarah felt that familiar flutter of hope in her chest, the feeling that had sustained her through 3 years of war and 6 months of unprecedented peace. She thought of William studying xenobiology, of the green shoots beginning to show in Earth's healing soil, of the lights of New Geneva reaching toward the stars. She thought of what humanity and the Kethamori had accomplished together, and what they might accomplish with others. "Admiral Morrison," she said, her voice steady and sure, "please inform the Andorian coalition that we accept their invitation, and send word to the other species as well. If they want to learn about cooperation, we'll teach them. And if they want to learn about redemption," Vextar added, "we will share that as well." Morrison's smile widened. "I'll make the arrangements. Fair warning, though. This is going to change everything. Again." "Good," Sarah said, looking out at the stars that no longer seemed cold and distant, but warm with infinite possibility. The galaxy could use a little more change. As the Admiral's image faded and the station continued its orbit around Earth, Sarah and Vextar stood together in comfortable silence, watching the dance of ships and stars beyond the viewport. Former enemies had become partners, partners had become friends, and friends were about to become something the galaxy had never seen before. Teachers of hope, ambassadors of the impossible, living proof that love could triumph over hatred, understanding over fear, cooperation over conquest. The future stretched before them, vast and uncertain and beautiful beyond imagination. And for the first time in either of their lives, they were not afraid of what it might bring. Ready for the next impossible thing? Sarah asked. Vextar's mandibles clicked in what had become their species' newest expression, one that roughly translated as joyful anticipation. With you as my partner, Captain Sarah Chen, the alien replied, I am ready for anything. Behind them, Earth continued to heal. Around them, the stars beckoned with promise. And ahead of them, the galaxy waited to learn what two impossible friends could teach about the power of choosing love over fear. The story of Sarah Chen and Vextar was just beginning, and it was going to change everything. Numbriness.